when I finish racing, I don't know whether I'll continue riding a bike for pleasure. It'll probably just be cafe rides. I ride to a cafe, ride back. I'm not sure if I could handle just going out to do a ride to my front door.
What about mountain biking? I love cycling. I've ridden all of my life, but
Yeah.
I guess I've really rediscovered the joy of, like you just say, going for a ride, because mountain biking offers that stimulation. You ever dabbled in that at all?
Yeah, a bit. I did it in New Zealand for a bit until I got overconfident, crashed, and thought I've got more to lose here than gain.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll stop now. And that seems to be a general trend with my mountain biking. I sort of get first couple of days, sort of right, play it safe, Alex. Next couple of days, I think I'm Matthew van der Poel, and then on day 5, I end up on the floor realising I'm not, and I could hurt myself. So, yeah.
And it's different for you, and I mean that sort of softly introduces me to a topic that I'm fascinated by, because when I was a child, I heard of haemophilia, and just the explanation scared the hell out of me. Can we talk about it? I mean, you're probably sick to death of talking about this.
No.
You talk about cycling and haemophilia, really. If you have a mountain bike crash and you have a nasty gash, what happens to you?
I heal like anyone else because I would have had my medication. This haemophilia has come a very long way in a relatively short space of time, from basically when I was born. Before I was born, like a brief history of haemophilia. Before I was born, haemophiliacs were treated with blood transfusions, or concentrated blood transfusions. When your blood forms a clot, whether it be inside or outside, there's 13 steps. I don't have the 8th one. So if I get a paper cut or something, the body will find a way around it. That'll be fine. If I get a deep gash, or the real big problems for haemophiliacs are internal bleeding. So internal bleeding into joints and into muscles, that can be quite debilitating. Then it doesn't stop. And so haemophiliacs older than me, there's all sorts of problems, sort of disabilities because of damaged joints. So there's quite a lot of haemophiliacs I know that have had their ankles fused in one position. For example, my elbow, I don't know if the camera can see this, my elbow, that's as much as it straightens, that's as much as it bends.
Because you had a bleed there?
Numerous bleeds in this elbow as a kid. It doesn't affect me. I've got a limited movement in one of my ankles, but again, doesn't stop me doing anything. So I've been quite lucky in that respect, and that's because when I was young, the treatment was reactive. So get a problem, have treatment, problem would be fixed, but damage would be done. Whereas now the treatment's it's prophylactic, so it's proactive. It stops problems happening. So since the age of it was 11, maybe, I started going on to regular prophylactic treatment. I didn't have a problem since then. I met a kid in Dubai a couple of years ago, a lad named George Harrison, and he, exactly the same as me. I have haemophilia A. There's different, it's whether you miss the 8th one, the 9th, 7th. There's a few different haemophilias. In the different severities as well, and I have it as bad as you can get, as does this lad George, and he might be 11, 12 or 13 now, but he was 8 years old at the time. He'd never experienced an internal bleed, so he, to all intents and purposes, lived a normal life. Okay. And the other problem with being older is a lot of those, when they were treating haemophiliacs with concentrated blood transfusions, they weren't very efficient at fixing the problems. There was also there's an alarmingly large number of cases where the transfusions were infected with HIV and hepatitis, and there's all sorts of terrible things because they'd come over from America. People were paid to donate blood, so any Tom, Dick and Harry was donating blood for a bit of money, and they weren't screened or treated. So it's, and one good thing Theresa May did in her limited time in power was like brought the whole case up because it had been swept under the carpet. It was just tragic. Haemophilia now is very different. And when I say like I missed it by years. Like we're not talking decades, we're talking like years. So I was very lucky, but it also meant I was very new to having treatment that worked. And so I was kind of like not a test dummy for the doctors, but the doctors would be like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, because it's dangerous. And me and my parents kind of learnt as we went. The haemophilia thing and the pro cycling thing, it's kind of funny because I wouldn't be a pro cyclist if it wasn't for my haemophilia. And so when I was young, the doctor said to my mum and dad, get him in a swimming pool because being fit and healthy and having strong joints is like it goes hand in hand with the medication. So I was swimming all the time. I just wasn't very good at it. I was in a swimming club, a Chelmsford swimming club, swimming 5 or 6 times a week, early mornings, all sorts. And I got real fit. Alongside that, I wasn't allowed to do the contact sports in school in the UK, and like your football, rugby is your bread and butter of UK sport, and I was sort of sat on the sidelines, either refereeing, which I did once or twice, and as a schoolboy that is your quickest way to unpopularity, or just sat watching. And in the end, when I got into cycling, the school let me go train instead of doing, which is, I mean, kind of ironic, go out onto the roads with the traffic, go training rather than playing football. Like even now, more kids are playing football with haemophilia, but what's like rugby and boxing, it just still isn't. It's just a stupid thing to do as a haemophiliac. It's never a no, but it's like respect the condition, and there's a bloody million things out there you can do outside of boxing and rugby, and that's how I got into cycling. It's what I couldn't do in school that made me want to do a bunch of other stuff or just try what sports can I do. So I went sailing, and there's a big risk in sailing when the sail attached to a big metal bar called a boom, which is named because that's what the noise it makes when it clonks you on the head. Head injuries for haemophiliacs are not good at all. So I would be the only youngster at a sailing club with a helmet on, which is fine. Oh no, tell a lie, mum and dad felt bad for me, so they put one on my sister as well. Dad started mountain biking. I asked to join him. Kind of enjoyed it. Went out with had some pads and stuff, and Dad sort of built me up to it. And then I was joining Dad's mates, and then one of his friends, Eric Smith, had a road bike. I said, "Can I have a go on that?" And he took me to a time trial, and I raced the following week. Did 28 minutes and 1 second. Enjoyed it. Kept doing it. I don't even remember the buzz I got out of it either. I don't know why I kept going back either. Maybe to just be better next week than I was last week. And then did the schoolboys national time trial championships as a 14-year-old, and I'd seeded terribly because my sort of progression was very steep curve. And then finished the final in second place, and I was the only 14-year-old in the top 10 full of 16-year-olds. So I remember watching it, I was thinking, okay, I think I found something I'm good at. Ian Stannard was the one that unseated me from the top, actually, funnily enough.
You turned into a reasonable bike rider.
Yeah, I can beat Ian in a time trial every day of the week now. So, that's whole... the doctors were fully behind it. I was lucky with the doctor I had with Dr. Colvin, because when we said we'd taken up bike racing, he was like, well, his words were, well, we'd rather you play chess or a musical instrument, but yeah, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. Just be careful, please. It's all worked out. I was terrified of breaking my first bone, because you just, as a kid, would get these horror stories from how haemophilia was. So and we've all broken our collarbone, but I broke my shoulder blade in 2010 in Holland. And they said, you break a bone, you're in hospital for a month to control the bleeding. And I was out of hospital in days. I was back on my bike on the turbo in 7 days. I was on the road. I really shouldn't have been. My doctor was like, "You back on the bike?" I was like, He's like, "You back on the road?" I was like, He's like, "If you crash," I was like, "Yeah, I know." And I won European champ 7 weeks later.
Oh.
So it's nice. And then so with the charity, like we promote health, well-being in haemophiliacs, but my story is a very powerful message for families, mostly for parents actually, because the doctors do have to give them the worst case scenario, I think. Whereas it's like I'm in a position where I can give the best case scenario or a better case scenario. And it's interesting, I can win all the races under the sun, and that's good. But the biggest message that Little Bleeders I've ever given on behalf of Little Bleeders actually with like what you said, what happens when you crash? And it was Movistar team that asked. And they said, what happens when you crash? And it's not if, it is when. I said, I would have had my medication, so I'll be all right. I said, if I can carry on, I will. If I can't carry on, then I probably need to go to hospital. And he just went, right, so just like anyone else. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. Hospital might panic a little bit more when I get there, and I've got a necklace that's got all my details on. And it was like as nonchalant as that. And that to a parent they were like, oh, right, so if you're in quite a high-risk sport and not being treated any differently to anyone else on your team, why should my kid be treated any differently in school? And that's the most powerful thing we've done with Little Bleeders so far. And long term with the charity, there's a great disparity between treatment in the likes of the UK, here in Australia, compared with some third world countries, just simply uneducated countries. The treatment is not cheap. I learnt this when my name started getting about in the haemophilia world, and I'd get mums and dads messaging me on Facebook going, like, what can I do for my son? And I'd just very much be like, just keep on top of your regular treatment and get swimming. And they said, we have to do an 8-hour round trip for one treatment if our boy gets an internal bleed. And I was in tears, and I think that's just not fair. I mean, this was Ukraine. This first email, this father messaged me. It was the first time it really hit me for six. Just the disparity, how lucky I was, how lucky I am, just to simply be born in the UK. So I want to try and try and help that situation. You can't send money because corrupt government, and you're talking about corrupt countries as well. Corrupt governments just take it. You can't send treatment because it's not sustainable. You can send here's 20 treatments. That's great. It's going to last a month. Mm-hmm. What happens after that? So you have to educate. You have to educate governments to put money into haemophilia in a sustainable way, or you have to go for the pharmaceutical companies who, and again, I've worked within the UK. The pharmaceutical industry is quite. It's fascinating actually, the differences between America and the UK or Europe. I worked with one of the leading pharmaceutical companies on a haemophilia campaign to target getting haemophiliacs much more active, which is great from them because that's, if you look at it from a business sense, that's counterproductive for them because then you would require less treatment. But they do get a lot of bad press, and they're no angels, I think. However, it's this catch-22 where if haemophilia or any disease was not a profitable business for someone, we probably wouldn't have simple paracetamol or real basic medications, So it has to be. It just, that's how it works. Whereas in America, I was an advert for different It was horrible. I really hated it because I was there as an advert for selling this particular type of haemophilia medication. I was like, never again. But in Europe, we felt like we were making a difference to families' lives on a much more personal level. So that was a really good time. But yeah, like sort of encouraging them to be like come on, like greater good, I guess. Yeah, which Little Bleeders and Alex Dowsett taking on multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies. But yeah, that's Little Bleeders' aim.
That's a sort of noble thing. We're at half hour and the camera's about to knock out.